And you guys can fact check me. I believe if Kansas State beats Baylor, we're gonna have back-to-back Bedlam games no matter who wins. I think that's the way that's gonna play out if that happens. So I think Oklahoma State has to win their game tonight, obviously, and then if Kansas State beats Baylor as well. So yeah, interesting to talk about. If you guys want to talk. Me personally, this isn't a playoff team. Um, I don't think this team is good enough to play in the playoffs. I don't think this team is good enough to compete really with anyone in the top 10 right now from a playoff perspective. So, granted, yes, Oklahoma could get to the playoffs. I think um, based on some things that could happen, down the stretch here. But I don't believe that Oklahoma is a playoff team right now. Having said that, there has been some things that has happened today that has worked out to their benefit. Michigan State absolutely got obliterated by Ohio State, so um, for all intents and purposes, they're out of the discussion. Wake Forest got again the same thing happened to them against Clemson. They're out of the conversation. So then you really have when you look at this, look at this in totality. You've got Georgia that has a playoff spot locked up. They play Georgia Tech next week, and then they'll play, most likely Alabama in the SEC championship game. So Georgia wins or loses in that game, they're in. So you got Georgia as one spot. Alabama wins if say they win today against Arkansas. They beat Auburn in the Auburn Bowl, and then they beat Georgia in the SEC championship game. They're in. However, if you're a proponent of Oklahoma trying to get them to the playoffs, you absolutely are rooting for Georgia to win that game and continue winning. If they win, it means the SEC probably, well, not probably, they definitely will only get one team in. If that's the case, the other thing that you look at just chaos in the Pac-12. Oregon plays at Utah tonight. I'm not sold on Oregon. I think Ohio State should be the number 2 ranked team in the country, no worse than number 3 right now. No matter what Oregon does tonight, I think Ohio State should jump them. But from a Big Ten perspective, you really have Ohio State or Michigan. Those are the 2 teams that are going to, potentially make the playoffs for the Big Ten. Ohio State goes to Michigan next week, and then likely plays either Wisconsin or Minnesota in the Big Ten championship game. So you've got two spots there, and I think the next 2 spots are really kind of up for grabs. You've got, looking at perhaps Oklahoma or Oklahoma State getting into the mix there, and then you've got a Pac-12 team. So Oklahoma fans root for Utah if you want Oklahoma to have a chance in there tonight, to really get kind of Oregon out of the fray, so to speak. So I think most Oklahoma fans will be rooting for Kansas State, just in general tonight, just because Baylor's ahead of Oklahoma, but a Kansas State win, like some of you guys have mentioned, um, solidifies Oklahoma's spot in the Big 12 championship game, no matter what happens in Bedlam next week. So, and then obviously Baylor's ranked ahead of Oklahoma, and then you've got a couple of teams that are ahead of Oklahoma, but the fact that they won't have a conference championship game, I think will probably lead to their demise, so to speak. Notre Dame's a team that's ranked ahead of Oklahoma, and then Mississippi's another team that's ranked ahead of Oklahoma in the in the playoff ranking. So I think Oklahoma, should they win out, should they beat Oklahoma State twice, they would certainly jump those 2 teams. So I think it comes down to I think if Oklahoma was to win out, it would come down to an Oklahoma versus a Cincinnati situation, or um, or an Oregon if they happen to keep going undefeated. I think if Oregon goes undefeated the rest of the way, they probably get in over a one-loss Oklahoma team, just kind of based on how um, less than impressive Oklahoma has been through the complete totality of the season. I think that the Oklahoma versus Cincinnati conversation would be interesting. I think Cincinnati probably gets in Oklahoma, but I think it's a over Oklahoma, but I think it's an interesting conversation. So whatever you guys want to talk about, um, I do think Oklahoma has fairly, not completely solidified, but they've got a good, you've got a good opportunity for Oklahoma to make it to a New Year's Six bowl game with 10 wins here. So depends on what happens with everyone else, but I think Oklahoma, at the very least, is up there in the contention and in that conversation for that. Um, so let's talk through just kind of the overall impressions of Oklahoma right now after this game, and then and taking some of your comments and questions about um, looking at Oklahoma in terms of the trajectory against Oklahoma State, playoff team, and then would love the conversation Caleb Williams versus Spencer Rattler. What do you think? What do you think gives Oklahoma the best chance to win Bedlam, and then more than that, win a conference championship this year? So let me go through a lot of comments here about just about this poor play calling on offense and defense. The last possessions I thought were a little bit. Completely agree, Ryan. Grinch tends to get conservative in times like that for whatever reason. Yeah, he didn't bring as much pressure as they had been in the past, or throughout the game, um, and then really didn't do it as much as they could. They kind of got fortunate for whatever reason. They never doubled Kohler. They kept him. He was wide open through you know, last two possessions. So I think Oklahoma got lucky to a certain extent, and I thought the play calling was very poor throughout the entire game on the offensive side of the ball. Um, with a struggling quarterback, Oklahoma really needed to rely on the run game, and they really didn't. So um, I think that's interesting coming going into the next game because I said they've got to rely on that defense, and they've got to rely on a solid running game. So the offensive line needs to be really really good against the best again the best defense in the Big 12 is Oklahoma State by far at this point. Greg, the learning curve is now in effect. Absolutely, I think and there's some conversations. Is I don't really. He's not played as well as I thought he would in these last two games, Greg. But it's definitely not any time to give up on him. He's the quarterback of the future, and this is good learning experience. I mean, specifically these last two games. However, this game you had another poor performance, but you still found a way to win. You don't want to live on borrowed time too much, but so that's why I think it's interesting. If it was me, I might make the change and go back to Rattler because I just think he might give you a little bit um, more opportunity to be successful, opportunity to win this game just based on his ability to see the field, maybe a little bit better than Caleb is because it looks like it's going a little bit too fast for him right now, and I think the comment here is right on just in terms of just the defensive scheme and better defensive players that he's seeing now versus where he was in the past. So against the likes of Texas and Texas Tech and Kansas and some of those other teams. So and then knowing how much better Oklahoma State is on defense than even Baylor and Iowa State um, will be interesting to see what that looks like. Return trip, yeah, Texas. It's man. We talk about how things are a little bit tough for Oklahoma, not as good as we've been in the past, and talent and everything around that. But Texas, I think what they've dropped to, are they 4-7 now? I think they were 4-6 coming into this game, 4-7. I think they've lost six straight. I believe they host Kansas State to finish the season next year.